Adam Schefter dropped a bombshell on the radio this morning on 97.5 The Fanatic, teasing some potentially big news for the Philadelphia Eagles that's going to drop next week. What did he allude to? We're going to investigate that. A Packers insider gives us insight on a serious offensive coordinator candidate for the Eagles to replace Kevin Patullo, and the Eagles show interest in another top candidate who a lot of teams across the NFL are very interested in. It's all coming up on today's Philadelphia Eagles Now. My name is Chase Sr., so let's dive right in. So Schefter, one of the biggest and best newsbreakers across the NFL among all NFL media members, was on 97.5 The Fanatic this morning. And Schefter was doing what he always does with John Kincaid, friend of the show, and Andrew Salchunas, friend of the show. And he was talking about the recent happenings around the Eagles, fielding questions and answering all of them. But then at the end of the interview, he dropped an absolute bombshell. And it has left all of Philadelphia wondering what he meant. And here's what transpired. So Andrew Salchunas, who I used to be an intern alongside at 97.5 The Fanatic, he said this: "We appreciate you, and we appreciate the time, man. We'll talk to you next week. Maybe reacting to an offensive coordinator hire in Philadelphia. Maybe the smoke will come out of NovaCare. We'll find out soon." At that point, you expect Schefter to say, "Thanks for having me," and hang up. That's not what happened. Schefter then answers that by saying this: "And maybe there will be even more than that next week." And Salchunas was going to let Adam Schefter go, but then John Kincaid, the veteran radio host that he is, steps in. And he says, "Hold on. More than that? Wait a minute. More than that? What are you hinting at?" And when I watched this clip, I had noticed that Salchunas was going to let Schefter go, and that was going to be it after a fantastic interview that Salchunas and Kincaid did on the morning show. But then Kincaid steps in, and this is just great radio. It's fantastic journalism, and it's a high-level follow-up, and you can tell that Kincaid has been doing this for a really long time, multiple decades. And it brought up something that I remember hearing when I was at Temple University studying broadcasting, studying journalism, and it was great advice from Dan Patrick, one of the most legendary radio hosts and Sports Center anchors in the history of sports media. And what Dan Patrick was talking about was something that I learned after this interview that I did with Stephen A. Smith. Look at me back at Temple University, probably back in 2012, 2013. I've got the fade rocking, and I've got the shape up going alongside Stephen A. Smith. And that advice from Dan Patrick was, when you are doing interviews, don't focus on the next question all the time. And it's easy to get into that, right? Because you want the interview to be good. You might have some questions or notes jotted down, and you want to be able to knock it out of the park with that next interview. But the point from Dan Patrick was active listening. And this can be applied for anybody who wants to get into sports broadcasting, anybody who is struggling with communication, or in everyday conversations that we have with people, with the different dialogues that we converse with, right? And what Patrick said, when you're focusing on that next question, you're not actively listening. And the interview subject might be saying something that warrants a follow-up. And if you miss that follow-up question, the audience listening, watching, is going to be like, "Well, hold on. Why didn't you ask a follow-up? I wanted to know more." And so when I was applying for jobs and I was looking to further my career in media, I sent a lot of people this interview that I did with Stephen A. Smith because I wanted a progress check. I wanted to self-scout. I wanted people to scout me. And I thought the interview went really well. I asked Stephen A. about Allen Iverson. I asked him about John Chaney, the legendary Temple University basketball coach who went to 5 Elite Eights during his tenure on North Broad Street. And the most consistent advice I got back from professionals all across the industry, and a guy like Dan Patrick, was, you could have asked a follow-up about Allen Iverson. You could have asked a follow-up about John Chaney, because Stephen A. has had and does have some legendary stories when he was a beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer covering Allen Iverson and John Chaney. Two very entertaining figures to cover on a daily basis. But instead of actively listening, I was so focused on asking the next question and not the follow-up. So because John Kincaid asked that follow-up, long story short, we got this from Schefter. He said, maybe it'll be even more than a discussion next week than just an offensive coordinator. We'll see. We'll see what happens over the next few days. So Schefter says that. What could Adam Schefter be alluding to here? What is the big news that he is teasing that could drop next week during Super Bowl 60 week? And I'm going to be in San Francisco, Santa Clara for our coverage of Super Bowl 60 here at Chat Sports, and I'll try to find out some information. But let's spitball here. Was Adam Schefter alluding to an A.J. Brown trade? That is a popular go-to topic, right? That's impossible. It's not going to happen. A trade of A.J. Brown cannot go down until the new league year gets underway. A trade during Super Bowl week literally cannot happen. And here are some important NFL dates coming up. You can screenshot this if you want. February 8th, Super Bowl 60. Patriots, Seahawks at Levi's Stadium, the home of the Niners. February 9th, the waiver period opens. February 17th to March 3rd, that is the franchise tag window. February 23rd to March 2nd, NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Myself and Chip will be there. March 9th to the 11th, the early negotiating window. March 11th, the new league year begins. That's when trades can transpire and take place. March 29th to April 1st, annual meeting for the NFL. April 17th, the restricted free agency offer sheet deadline hits. April 23rd through the 25th, that's the 2026 NFL Draft in Pittsburgh. May 1st, fifth-year option deadline. May 19th to the 20th, spring meetings. June 1st, the dead cap split. June 15th, restricted free agency qualifying offer deadline. July 15th, tag extensions can take place. So it's not going to be an A.J. Brown trade. Is the big news next week that the Eagles will announce a new stadium that is going to be built in the foreseeable future somewhere in Philadelphia? I would imagine it would be South Philadelphia, right? Lincoln Financial Field opened up in 2003. And while it hasn't been around that long over the course of human history, it is an outdated stadium compared to other state-of-the-art venues across the NFL. And a few months ago, Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie sent out a memo and a questionnaire to Eagles season ticket holders, asking Eagles fans about the possibilities of a new stadium, what they think about a dome potentially, because that would allow the Eagles to host a Super Bowl. That would allow the Eagles to host things like the Final Four and the National Basketball Championship and other events indoors. And a new state-of-the-art stadium in Philadelphia would be pretty awesome. I am team outdoor stadium compared to dome because I think that what makes football great is some of the outdoor elements. I think it leads to you being a more multiple and tougher football team. I think it gives the Eagles a home field advantage. I want quarterbacks like Jerrod Goff, Dak Prescott coming into the link in the cold and winning during the playoffs. You go inside, yeah, it might be louder, but you don't get that edge of being a more multiple football team that can win in all types of different weather conditions, and you just don't get that weather in your favor. I want Matthew Stafford having to throw in the snow, in a blizzard, in the divisional round. The Eagles were so equipped to play in that game. Other teams are not. So maybe it's a new stadium that the Eagles are going to announce. Is offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland going to retire? One of the best, most illustrious careers for any offensive line coach in the NFL. He's 63. He's also the run game coordinator. A potential holdup for some of these new offensive coordinator candidates who might not be convinced that they want to take the job yet with the Eagles. They might want to bring in their own offensive line coach and their own run game coordinator to fit their scheme, their play calling, their scheme tendencies, and their play designs. Is Lane Johnson going to retire? Coming off that Liz Frank injury, he's hinted at retirement a couple of times over the last few years. He's 35 years old, and if he were to call it quits, he's going to go down as one of the best Eagles in franchise history, and Lane Johnson is going to be a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, even with the PED suspension. Are the Eagles going to sign a player to a contract extension? Maybe, perhaps this. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith, they are up for contract extensions. This has been talked about on social media. I don't think this happens, though. Could the Eagles shock everybody and fire Nick Sirianni next week because they're not happy with what has happened with their offensive coordinator search, and OCs don't want to take this job because they have to work under Sirianni, 1, and 2, they might think that he's a dead man walking, and if the 2026 season doesn't go well, he's going to get fired, and then the OC would have a lack of job security. I don't think that happens because you're this late in the process. You're going to fire Nick Sirianni after he's been sitting in on all of these offensive coordinator interviews. He's won 70% of his games. Eagles have made it to the playoffs in each of the 5 years he's been the head coach. Double-digit wins in 4 straight years. 2 Super Bowl appearances already and a Super Bowl championship. That would be shocking. And I don't really love how Schefter went about this, right? You're about to sign off and you just dangle a carrot out there. And you tease something, leaving all of us to wonder, what exactly are you talking about? Especially in this city where rumors can run rampant, right? And so Jimmy Kempski actually tweeted this out in 2024, January 1st of 2024. Then he retweeted it after what happened with Schefter. And he said, the absolute worst kind of reporting is when someone says big news is coming and oh boy, it's a doozy. Say what you know or shut the F up. Pretty much Schefter's like, yeah, big news coming up, but I'm not going to tell you. So over the next week, we're just going to be waiting and wondering what this big news potentially is and what this bombshell could be. But now our imaginations are running crazy. Still to come here on Eagles Now. An insider gives us insight on a serious Eagles offensive coordinator candidate, and the Eagles show interest in another top candidate. We'll get to that. Don't go anywhere. Continue to be a real one and hang out here on the show. And speaking of real ones, PrizePicks, a bunch of real ones there. Today's Philadelphia Eagles Now, made possible thanks to our friends at PrizePicks. The big game is almost here. There's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with PrizePicks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before next year. Close the season out right with PrizePicks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Find your community on PrizePicks. With the new social feeds feature, you can share PrizePicks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow PrizePicks partners like us and tail or fade our picks with just one click. Join the millions of users sign up for America's #1 sports picks app. 4-pick power play for the big game. Drake May more than a half passing touchdown. Jackson Smith-Njigba, more than 93.5 receiving yards. Sam Darnold, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. And Stephon Diggs, more than 44.5 receiving yards. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So Adam Schefter also with this on this January 28th this morning. The Packers quarterbacks coach Sean Mannion interviewing today a second time for the Eagles offensive coordinator job. We were all over this yesterday. We did 2 long-form videos on Mannion. I also gave you a YouTube short. And so knowing that Mannion the last 2 years has been an offensive assistant under Matt LaFleur, and then this past year, the quarterbacks coach for Jordan Love under LaFleur and for Green Bay, I reached out to Peter Bukowski of The Leap. Does a great job covering the Green Bay Packers, has a large following covering the Packers as well. And I asked him, do you have any insight on Sean Mannion? What do you know about Mannion? Here's what he had to say. And the Green Bay Packers are clearly very high on Mannion. So too are a lot of other people across the NFL, especially in coaching circles. Bukowski, the Packers, think that he's a future head coach. They love him. Tom Clements was the quarterback Yoda in Green Bay forever, one of the best quarterback coaches of the modern era. Mannion was the hand-picked successor. He hasn't been coaching long, that's the only thing. He's a really bright young coach. Say what you want about the Packers. They push to ban the tush push. They've been one of the best developers of coaching talent across the NFL. They have been at the forefront of great offensive movements over the course of NFL history, and they are a great and well-run organization. They know what they're doing when it comes to hiring coaches. So pretty notable that the Packers are that high on Sean Mannion. Only 33 years old, third-round pick, 89th overall in the 2015 draft by the Rams out of Oregon State. He didn't stop playing football long ago. He was most recently with the Seahawks in 2023 under Pete Carroll. In 2024, became the Packers offensive assistant, and in 2025, the quarterback's coach. Something else to note here, the Packers can't give him a job promotion, right? They could call him the de facto offensive coordinator, but Matt LaFleur signed a contract extension. Matt LaFleur calls plays. So the pluses of Mannion, he's worked under Matt LaFleur. You would be getting some ingredients of the Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan system, which I really like the idea of. He's a respected young football mind. He must have really impressed the Eagles, given the lack of coaching experience, to get a second interview. The only known candidate to get a second interview for this Eagles OC job. The minuses are pretty clear, right? And Peter Bukowski hinted at it. He referenced it. Limited coaching experience. Has zero play calling experience. And this hire, because of that, would be a risk. This is a veteran-laden offense. They're top half as far as having one of the oldest offenses in the NFL. And there are a lot of veteran players who have had a lot of success individually and team-wise who have a lot of say with what the Eagles do on the offensive side of the ball. There's also this, also from Adam Schefter. A lot of Schefty bombs here today. After Broncos passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach Davis Webb interviewed this week for the Raiders and Bills head coaching jobs, he received interview requests for offensive coordinator jobs with the Eagles, the New York Giants, and the Baltimore Ravens. Of note here, Sean Payton, Broncos head coach, is moving on from Joe Lombardi, the Broncos OC. I think that could be a move for Denver to elevate Davis Webb from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator, even though Sean Payton calls plays. Some insight on Davis Webb here. A young, innovative coach, learned under Cliff Kingsbury. A lot of things have been silent on the Kingsbury front. Could the Eagles show some interest there? They did a couple of years ago. Davis Webb, of course, has learned under Sean Payton, one of the better modern offensive minds in the league. He helped Patrick Mahomes in college. Mahomes has talked about this when they were both in Lubbock at Texas Tech. He likes Sean Mannion. Inexperienced coach, very young. Last played in 2022. He's only 31 years old. But a name to watch here. I think he goes back to Denver, or I think he goes to another gig where he can have more say of what that team does on offense. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll be going live a little bit later here on Philadelphia Eagles Now. As always, thank you so much for your support. And don't forget to give me a follow on social media, X, Instagram, TikTok, at Chase_Senior. Let's get the 10K on TikTok before we go to the Super Bowl here. Launched that page back in November, and I'm also on Facebook, Chase Senior Chat Sports.